Hello, my name is Michael and I'm an industrial engineering student at La Trobe University. For my engineering materials class, I'll be looking at stresses and strains. Today, we'll be going through what is engineering stress, what is engineering strain, and to follow the form of this channel, I'll be looking at it in the natural environment. First of all, we've got to look at tension. Tension is when an object has a force applied to both ends in an outward direction. Take this bit of grass. When I hold it at both ends and apply force pulling in the outwards direction, I will be applying tension on this grass. The force I'm applying will eventually resolve in a fracture point happening. So if I apply, there was my fracture point. As I apply this force, we'll be able to find the yield strength, the ultimate strength, and finally, the fracture point. Opposite to tension, we have compression, where forces are applied equally at both ends, compressing the object inwards. Take this stick here. I apply forces at both ends. I will be forcing this stick in a compression format. As you can see, it is flexing inwards. Eventually, there will be a fracture point, which is where this stick will break, but along the way, there will be a yield strength and an ultimate strength. We're very close to be able to get the ultimate strength, and shortly, we'll have the yield. We'll have the fracture point. Shear force is when there is a force applied to the top of an object and a force applied to the bottom of the object. Trees are amazing at this, as they have the wind pushing them at the top in one direction and the earth at the bottom holding them in the opposite direction, which will be creating a shear force being applied to the tree. Torsion is when the base of an object is stationary, with no forces being applied to it, and the top has forces being applied in the opposite direction to each other. The best way I can find this is in the use of the old way of trying to light a fire, where you would have a stick, you would be spinning it at the top really quickly. If you break it down to the first couple of milliseconds, when you're applying the forces in the opposite direction at the top with your hands, down the bottom, when the bottom actually starts to spin, which is when it loses friction, that is actually the fracture point. When graphing stress versus strain, we end up with a graph like this. On the x-axis, we have strain, which is how much force is being applied to each end. On the y-axis, we have the stress, which is how strong the object is at that point. I will use compression to try and help explain this graph, taking this bit of wire. So at the starting point at the base of the graph, we have the point where no stress is being applied or force, which is this point here, where the object could slide out of my hands as I'm not applying any forces. The next point we have is the yield strength. This is the point where force can be applied and the object will return to the exact same state that it was before. So I apply force and retract, and you can see this wire keeps retracting to where it was. Within that, we'll be able to calculate the Young's module, which is the slope of the graph at this point. Calculating the slope can be easily done by the rise over the run. The next point we have is the ultimate strength. The ultimate strength is where forces are applied, like so, and the object doesn't return to its natural state. As you can see, it keeps getting closer and closer inwards. So that is the ultimate strength. That is where forces aren't applied back. Our next point we have is the fracture point. To show the fracture point, I'm going to use a stick instead, as it will be able to better illustrate this point. As I apply my forces, you'll be able to see the yield strength, the ultimate strength, which is where our first cracking starts to form within a stick. So, as I break it, the stick is still attached, as you can see, but we do actually have a slight crack line down here, which means it's not at its strongest point anymore. The next point is fracture, which is where it breaks off into two separate pieces.